wild. An email came through that said doubt in the wild.
Ooh,
Remember we told that story about the quote Pacific
we
Northwest?
sure did.
And then Mark McGinnis called in and was like, that sounds a little fishy. I
Yep.
don't know. I don't know a spot that has that
That and that.
type of
Yep.
a setup and that type of a thing. Well, the original storyteller wrote in and said, gentlemen, I was gutted, all caps, when I heard you guys call into question the veracity of my Prose in the Wild submission. I have written and rewritten my response in the weeks since. And thankfully, you guys provided not only a problem, but also the solution. I thought to myself, what would betterhelp.com/surf say to me? The answer was immediately obvious. I smiled to myself, and a sense of serenity settled over my previously troubled mind. I cannot win this argument without exposing a sacred space to the masses. As such, I will simply continue to watch the waves and be grateful that there are still some wild places out there off the regularly beaten path. Brandon from the Pacific Northwest.
Good job, Brandon, for falling on the sword right there, for sacrificing your reputation as a truthful person in order to save a secret spot. We need more of you out there.
I'd go a step further and say, Brandon, perhaps we were creating the smoke screen for you by printing a retraction after we shared your story to make it seem like your story was made up and therefore keep your spot hidden.
The best part of surf, the layers upon layers of smoke.
And you didn't even recognize our good work that we were doing here.
Speaking of Prose in the Wild, I brought up the Prose in the Wild to Laird Hamilton himself, the Pro in the Wild featuring him on his board. Did I get this? Did you listen to the, so correct me if I'm wrong. So I told Laird, hey, on the podcast, have a segment called Prose in the Wild you feature regularly. Laird cracked a smile. And then I said, and so one, and you tell me, David Lee, did I get the story right? In my memory, guy was surfing. Laird comes out of the mist with a Walkman on his arm and earbuds in. He drops in on the dude and does a helicopter.
He didn't drop in on the dude.
Okay. See, Laird knows. And then paddled off.
It was a spot in Kauai, and it was kind of a ledgy barrel, and Laird showed up on a stand-up paddle, which was like not the right board for the day. Took off on one that looked like it was going to double up, and did a helicopter, like nose ride helicopter in the most critical section of the wave.
Okay, so I missed the I mean, I got that part right, but I told Laird, the guy said you dropped in on him. And Laird and Laird said, sounds like me except for the dropping in part. And so Laird said, if that wants to be that guy's truth, that's cool. You have it. But more likely I was either on the way first and you were trying to fade behind me, or I was polite enough to know that that's what you're doing and go out ahead and give you the wave behind me to surf, whatever. Laird took umbrage with the dropping in on part. So, which made me think Laird must be a chivalrous dude out in the water, because that was the one part he's like, that doesn't sound like something I would do, the dropping in part. And so, but if that guy needs to think that for his story, think that. Laird was going to give it to him, but also question the dropping in.
I'm always impressed with pros who hear a story from 20 years ago and they know exactly the wave that you're talking about.
He didn't. He said it did sound like something he would do. And I asked him if he still listened to music in the lineup, and he said no, he wishes that he could. That is something that technology hasn't caught up to the way Laird wants to listen to music in the water, but he does want to listen to music in the water.
But he did have an iPod setup back then.
Yeah. He said, yep. He said that was true. But I think now he's foiling only, and I think the foiling and the music listening don't work well together.
Weird. I mean, that is something they got to make some sort of device that would work nowadays.
He said, we talked about it. He said, I said, don't they have like a Bluetoothy thing or something? He said, yeah, but there's always something slapping at your neck, or it's not quite worked out for Laird yet.
Got it. Okay. Well, I do have another Pros in the Wild.
Great.
Somebody said, hey, Chaz and DLS, this Pros in the Wild is a bit of a throwback. I reckon it was fall of 97 or maybe the early winter of 98. I'd recently transferred to the University of California in Santa Barbara from my inland locale, where I had only been surfing about once or twice a week. I was living in heaven surfing. I was in heaven living in 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝐿𝐴 and surfing the 805 zone up and down the coast almost daily. I was lucky that I even graduated. One day, and one cold and foggy morning, my friends and I headed out for a surf somewhere south of campus. I won't name names out of respect for the local crew, though it is not a secret spot. I packed my gear to include my brand new bright white off the rack 6.0 Channel Islands MTF with glassed on fins that I had recently purchased from their OG shop in Santa Barbara. The waves were average, nothing super memorable, maybe waist to chest high. Crowd was pretty light at the spot that morning and the vibe was mellow. My buddy and I were out the back and we looked back at the beach to see a few other people on the beach with boards under their arms preparing to paddle out exactly where we were sitting. We were about to get triple ode, 𝗟𝗶𝗿 style, ode to the Surfer Magazine message form. I have no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
I was never on that message form. Anyways, as the trio of dudes get closer, I look over and recognize it to be Dan Malloy, Tim Curran, and his brother Nathaniel. I did my best to play it cool and just nod my head and say hello. They find their peak and we settle into ours and enjoy the session. A wave comes my way. I swing around, surf it to the best of my meager abilities. I manage to take it all the way to the beach and attempt a little floater on the end section to step off onto the sand. Everything was going to plan until I come unstuck and my board and the board flips over in the whitewash and I landed right on top of it, upside down in a sitting position, pinning it to the sand. I stood up with the worst Charlie horse ever. It felt like Mike Tyson in his prime had given me an uppercut straight to the butt cheek. I set my magic board down, reached behind me to rub the afflicted cheek, only to feel my index finger disappear and feel very, very warm. I turned to look at my right index finger, and there's a little bit of blood and what appeared to be a gaggle of fish eggs. I had bunches of pieces of ass fat stuck to my finger. I started to feel lightheaded. I set my board down and started waving and yelling for my buddy to come in. And eventually he did, but not before Dan and Nathaniel paddled in to assist me. They downed their boards and each threw one of their arms over my shoulder and helped me walk back up the beach to my buddy's truck. Thankfully, he was following behind us, carrying both of our boards. They helped me get into the truck, and my buddy drove me to the hospital to get stitched up. I had a drain tube placed in my cheek and 8 to 10 stitches to sew up the wound. The board survived unscathed. Superior glass job by the boys at Channel Islands. It was a memorable session to say the least, and Dan Malloy and Nathaniel Curran are legendary humans for their assist. Thanks, gentlemen. Keep work. Fresno Ripper.
Fresno Ripper, thank you so much. Great story, shining the proper light on two genuinely good dudes.
Totally. Rippers, too. I mean, I
Yeah.
saw footage of Nathaniel this past week at the Palm Springs Surf Club going berserk. And I'm like, I've surfed that wave. It's kind of gutless. Like he was just ripping.
Yeah, no, exceptional surfers, the both, and exceptional humans. And now, proof.
Do you have a laceration story from surfing? Do you know what your worst laceration was?
Yeah, I've definitely had. Are you talking about on the board or like rock or what?
Anything. I mean, whatever. Do you have any good stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but like I was in Bondi or somewhere around there, one of the, Tamarama or whatever it's called, somewhere around there. Jumped off, did a rock jump. It was or I like jumped into a pit or something, like, and so I was like, oh, and so I kicked my foot so hard, like it all the way to the bone, just shredded my foot. But I didn't want to look like a big old baby, so I paddled out, surfed. I literally couldn't stand. I just would like drop knee, or I don't know what I was doing. Went in, it was just like gushing blood. It was one of those nasty ones to the
It was
bone.
on, so it was on the paddle out
It
before
was
you
on the
even got to
paddle
the
out.
water.
Yeah, stupid.
Brutal. Well, if there was cameras back in the day, you would have ended up on kook slams or something.
So would have.
I had one where the leash extends and then like whips the board, rubber bands the board back
Yeah.
at you, like after I'd kicked out of a wave or ducked out the back of a wave or something. And it hit me in the side of the head and pierced my earlobe. Like the nose of the board pierced literally my earlobe in half.
Oh.
And but it was like such right behind your earlobe, there is skull. And so it
Yeah.
really just felt like a punch to the skull. And so I was like dazed by it, had my hand up against my ear, and then felt, the split and the warmth of the blood. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And my buddy was with me, and I looked at him and I'm like, how is it? and he just got wide-eyed and just goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, we should go in." And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no, that's not good."
Yeah.
And it was Thanksgiving morning actually, and we were hustling up the beach, like we are walking up the beach, and I could feel the flap, like the
Yeah.
coolness of the wind hitting in a way that never hit before, and the flappiness of it. And he looked over and he goes, "Maybe we should jog,"
Yeah.
because he was like, "We got to get to the car quickly." And the funniest thing about that story was I end up at urgent care, and they were gonna stitch me up, and I have at a handful of times in my life, I'm gonna say 5 times, fainted due to the sight of either blood or needles. And
Okay.
this was one of those times. I don't think it's happened since, but up until that point, it was an affliction. I somehow got over it. But I remember the girl, she was like kind of cute, the nurse, and she brought over the needle, and she's like, I kind of turned white and she noticed it, and she goes, "You don't have a fear of needles, do you?" And it was like too late, you know?
You were down for the
And
count.
she, yeah, she had given me, I think before that, or maybe because of that, gave me a cup of water. So I had a cup of water in my lap, and I felt the nausea coming. And next thing I knew, I was waking up and I had this huge puddle in my pants and I thought I had peed my pants.
Oh,
And so she woke me up with like the smelling, whatever that stuff is. And like I come to, and when I don't know if you've ever passed out, but when you come to, you're like delirious, like very, very confused.
yeah.
So I like came to, and I'm in a hospital, and this girl's looking at me and she's kind of cute. And I like look down and I see this wet stain on my pants, and I thought I peed
Oh,
my pants. And I was like, what am I doing here? You know? And then she
oh
tried to
man.
explain it to me. I was just mortified. It was brutal.
That is a cruel, cruel story. Oh, thinking you peed your pants? Do you
I know.
at this point, do you look like if they're gonna take blood or whatever, do you look at the needle while it's happening?
I can now, and I have no problem with it.
Like you look at it, you like watch them stick it in, watch the blood. Oh, cool.
I can now. Yeah.
Like I'm not squeamish about it, but at first I've like disliked more and more the older I get looking at it happening. Like I don't care
Interesting.
about the way it feels, but like looking at it, I just don't like it.
Yeah. No, like I said, there was a period of time where I did 4 or 5 times. I could tell you each story. But I don't know how or why I got over it. Just don't have it anymore.
When do you think Austin's gonna get his first stitches?
Like I said, he's kind of clumsy. So it
I
shouldn't be long, actually.
feel s-
Yesterday, yesterday, before we went trick-or-treating, he's like hanging out in front of the sofa, just spinning. Dad, look at me spin, just spinning. And I could see him getting off kilter. I'm like,
yeah.
dude, stop, please stop. You're going to get, what if you get injured and you can't go trick-or-treating? And then thankfully that stopped him. But I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing? This only ends with you smashing your head into the table. But it's
That's
fun, I
really good.
guess. Getting dizzy is fun.
Stitches are such, I feel, a rite of passage. Like I really question somebody, man or woman, if they've never had stitches.
To answer your question, he's 3. I presume it'll be before he's 4.
Yeah, I would imagine too.
He
Here's to
had a
hoping.
he had a good cut before he turned 1 that I got a phenomenal photo of.
That it's true though that stitches are there's more product now. Like I feel in our youth, if it was deep, you just got stitches. Now I feel there's like glue, there's other
Yeah.
things you can do to there's fancier butterfly band-aids, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Second Skin,
Yeah,
incredible product. Um his bad cut, it was right on his eye, like on the eyebrow,
those are
and
bleeders.
totally bleeders. Yeah. So I was like doing the dishes and Lauren was giving him a bath upstairs, and I hear like a thud, and then I just hear her go, "David, there's blood." And I like
Yes.
flew up the stairs. We met at the halfway point, and sure enough, he's just gushing out of like a boxer's kind of a
Yeah,
punch to the eye. And the first thing I did was whip out my camera and get a photo while I was holding him. And
good call.
Lauren is just like, "What are you doing? Why would you do that? Stop it. He needs help." In hindsight, greatest decision ever.
Of
She's
course.
appreciative. She appreciated my foresight in that moment because I knew I made the assessment he wasn't going to die.
Yeah.
So I have the time to take a photo, and you want to see, you're going to tell people about the story and you want to be able to have a photo that illustrates
Bloody
the story that you were
face.
telling. And it's an incredible photo.
Good job. Right move. And also, I think anybody who's been hurt some knows that the eyebrow cut is all bark, no bite. It is
Totally.
a bunch of blood and it's, yeah, minimal damage.
Well, if it's your first kid and it's the first one, it's pretty traumatizing.
That's
You
good.
know?